Welcome to Later the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, another in my series of what I call heavy thoughts. This is where I take a moment to share with you what's been on my mind lately. And what I've been thinking about lately is all the different types of music that I listen to, the different genres, the different styles. What got me thinking about this was as I was watching a video on the YouTube channel, Classic Album Review is the name of the channel. It's one of my favorite channels. And he was talking about Kiss, and I guess he kind of felt like some of his viewers might be surprised that he was a Kiss fan, because he covers a lot of progressive rock. He covers a lot of. I wasn't surprised that he was a Kiss fan, and it got me thinking about some of the stuff that I listen to, and some of it that might surprise people. And what I did was I took a look at the playlists that I have saved on Apple Music. That's a streaming service that I used. And as I was sort of going down all these different playlists that I have and that I listen to, I was kind of surprised by how much different types of stuff I have in there. And I'm going to get to that in a second and share with you all the playlists that I have. For those who don't know or aren't on streaming services, I believe most of the streaming services offer this, where you can create a playlist, you can put songs together in a list, to call it whatever you want to call it, or you can subscribe to playlists that other people have made. But as I was looking at all these different playlists, it was making me think about why is it that I'm into so much different types of music and different styles. And I've talked about this a little bit on the channel, that when I grew up, I don't know if it was because of my age, I'm kind of like a little too young. It's like my age kind of slips a little bit between the 70s and the 80s. People that are 3 to 5 years older than me aren't as much into the hair metal and the MTV type stuff as I am. So I was at an interesting age. I think that's part of it. I also had friends that had older brothers that were exposing me and them and us to different types of older classic type music. Maybe it was just the area that I grew up in, the radio stations that we had or something. I don't really know. Maybe it was a combination of all these things that contributed to this, but I really do listen to a lot of different stuff. Also, I was a music major in college, and I think when I went to college, I was exposed to a lot of different stuff there, like classical and jazz, and that got me listening to different things there. And I guess I've always just sort of been an adventurous listener. So here are the playlists that I have in my Apple Music. Now, the first so many playlists here are all ones that are already in Apple Music. Breaking Metal, I talked about this in my mid-year favorite 2022 albums. This is an Apple playlist that gets updated every couple days with new songs from new bands, and this is how I use it to discover a lot of new metal bands. Next, classical music for metalheads. This is heavy classical music. I want to do a video on this at some point, like for people who maybe want to listen to some classical music, they don't know where to go, you're a metalhead or a hard rocker, this is a great playlist. New Wave Essentials. I'm a child of the 80s, so I grew up with MTV and stuff like that, and I sort of have this soft spot for synth type music. When I was younger, it didn't have screaming guitar in it. I didn't want anything to do with it, but as I got older, I started to appreciate this more synth-based new wave type stuff, and it sort of takes me back to those early days of MTV and when I was in school and everything. Stoner Doom and Sludge. I'm a fan of like Doom and things like that. Synth Pop Essentials. Again, I like synthy type of stuff. I like pop type, catchy, hooky type stuff, so that's why I've got that playlist. All right, here's now ones that I made. Absolution Fest 2022. There's a music festival coming here to Tampa that's goth, dark wave type of stuff like that, and it's a 3-day thing, and went down the list of bands, put a couple songs from each band in there, put it on shuffle so I'm familiar with some of the bands before I go to it. AC/DC, Bon Scott era. I love Bon Scott, so sometimes I'm just in the mood for Bon era AC/DC. I have all the live stuff. Anything with Bon on it, I've got it in that playlist, the Australian stuff, the B-sides. Next, all-time favorite bands. I've mentioned my Maiden, Priest, Dio, Sabbath, Ozzy, AC/DC, my Big Six. I also have Candlemass in there. They are one of my all-time favorite bands. All their live albums, everything, put it in that playlist. Ballads. I'm a fan of mellow stuff, and I have everything in here from Neil Young to Elton John, to ballads from the Stones, and there's some Celtic ballads in there. I'm Irish. I have a soft spot for Celtic ballads in my heart, so I have a bunch of Celtic ballads inside there. Cult metal. This is 80s, obscure 80s type of stuff like Warlord, Omen, Manila Road, things like that. Doom playlist. Love doom metal. Favorite 70s hard rock. This is favorite albums and songs from Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, Thin Lizzy, UFO, etc., etc. Fusion jazz. I'm a big fan of fusion jazz. I love Manavishnu Orchestra. I'm a big fan of Return to Forever, Chick Corea's group, Return to Forever. Stanley Clarke's one of my favorite bass players. I also love Jaco Pastorius, his solo stuff, and Weather Report, and just any kind of Miles, when Miles was in his more fusiony phase. Herbie Hancock. I've got Herbie Hancock stuff in there. Goth. I mentioned I like synth stuff. I like dark synth stuff, dark wave stuff. I also have in there like post-punk stuff, like early Cure albums, Susie and the Banshee, Sisters of Mercy, stuff like that. Grunge. This isn't a huge playlist, but it's got all the Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, First Street Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins. I think I might have a couple other things in there. Hair metal. I grew up on hair metal, so I got to have a hair metal playlist. Dokken, Rat, Twisted, Quiet Riot, Cinderella, Motley, early Motley. Heavy classical music. This is one I'm making myself. I think I've got some Mahler in there, some Shostakovich, Dvorak, Tchaikovsky, of course. I love big Tchaikovsky fan. Heavy 70s proto metal playlist. I do videos on obscure heavy 70s stuff. I love searching around. It's one thing I like about streaming. I can dig around. They give you recommendations. One thing leads to another. I've got Sir Lord Baltimore, Captain Beyond, Bang, Atomic Rooster. I've done videos on all those bands. That's my playlist for that. An Iron Maiden live playlist, all Live Maiden, all the different Live Maiden albums. Jazz, funk, jam bands. I'm a big fan of like funky, jazzy type improv stuff. I love this group called Medeski, Martin, and Wood. They're like my favorite from that genre, but I have other things in there like John Schofield and the Jazz Mandolin Project. I like them. All right, jazz standards. I also really like vocal jazz things like Ella Fitzgerald, or big band stuff like Duke Ellington and Count Basie. The sort of the standards played how they were originally played, you know, with big bands and stuff like that. So I love that stuff. I got a Jimi Hendrix live playlist and a Jimi Hendrix studio albums playlist. This is one somebody else made. Martin Popoff's Top 500 Heavy Metal Songs of All Time. Martin had a book titled that. Somebody found all those songs, put them into a playlist. That's an awesome one to put on shuffle. Motorhead, 77 to 87 favorites. I did a video on that and made a playlist for it. Renaissance and medieval music. I love Renaissance music. I love lute music. I love going to Renaissance festivals, medieval music, hurdy-gurdies and crumhorns and things like that. I just love hearing these things, and so I have this big playlist. I have a lot of Renaissance and medieval CDs too, but I made a playlist of it here. My rock road trip playlist. This is my big one. I've got like, I don't know, 2,000 songs in it or something crazy like that. It's all my favorite rock and metal bands. No filler, no overplayed stuff, no Stairway to Heaven. It's all the cuts that I like. I've been building that playlist since I first got onto streaming years ago. Slayer, 83 to 90. Synthwave. I have a Synthwave playlist. For those who know, Synthwave is like sort of 80s synth with upbeat like drum stuff. Sometimes they can get pretty heavy. Bands like Dance with the Dead. I just saw them live not too long ago. Perturbator. I'm going to see him tomorrow night after I make this, the day after I make this video. So I'm also into a lot of that's a Magic Sword. Thin Lizzy, 80s Thin Lizzy. Getting ready to do a video on that. ZZ Top. Love ZZ Top. 20th century contemporary classical music. Probably my favorite side of classical music. I love experimental avant-garde classical music. Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. Edgar Varese. Morton Subotnick, he's an electronic artist. I just have all kinds of Xenakis. I have all kinds of stuff in there. I love that stuff. 70s era Judas Priest. I have an 80s playlist with like Men Without Hats and Gary Newman, the Human League and stuff like that, you know, because again, I grew up on that stuff and I have a soft spot for that. And my final playlist is 2022 releases. I talked about that in my mid-year report on that. New albums from 2022 that are making my list, and I'm keeping them in there and I'm listening to them. So I've got a lot of different stuff there. I'm kind of all over the map. And yeah, sometimes, you know, I mentioned I did a video about going through musical phases. I'll try to remember to link it down below. I go through phases, and it's not like I'm listening to all of this stuff every single day. But I do listen to this stuff fairly regularly, and it's not uncommon for me to jump from Dvorak to Maiden to Slayer to Celtic ballads, you know, I mean, I'll listen to all that all in the same day. So I'm kind of all over the map. So I'm curious about you out there. What about you? Do you listen to just all kinds of different stuff? What's your main genre? What's your second main thing that you listen to? Or do you just have a couple things that you stick with, maybe rock and metal, and you just stick with that? Or are you like me that you're just sort of all over the map? I'm real curious to hear about you guys and what you listen to and how much different stuff you guys listen to. So let me know in the description down below. Till we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.